You know, millions of us go to work every single day. But how often do we really stop and think about the systems that are supposed to make sure we all get home safe? Today, we're going to pull back the curtain on the global blueprint for workplace safety, ISO 45001. And trust me, this isn't about boring paperwork. It's about saving lives. So let's just start with a really direct question, and I want you to think about this no matter what you do for a living. How safe do you actually feel at work? Is safety something your company actively manages, or is it more of a, cross your fingers and hope for the best kind of deal?
To really answer that question, you can't just rely on luck. Organizations need a solid, structured approach. And that's exactly where an occupational health and safety, or OH&S, management system comes into play. Think of it as a strategic framework for finding and managing risks, and ISO 45001 is pretty much the world's go-to standard for building one.
Okay, so here's our game plan. First, we're going to tackle the big why. Like, what's the whole point of this? Then we'll get into the two absolute cornerstones that hold it all together, leadership and worker participation. And finally, we'll walk right through the powerful four-step cycle that really drives everything. Plan, do, check, and improve. All right, let's zoom out for a second and start with that big picture. Before we dive into the nuts and bolts, what is a standard like ISO 45001 really trying to do? What's the fundamental goal here? At its heart, it all comes down to these 5 key objectives. And I want you to notice the theme here. This is not about reacting after something bad has already happened. The entire focus is proactive. It's about preventing harm before it even has a chance to occur, constantly getting better, meeting every single legal requirement, and hitting very clear safety targets.
But, a system, no matter how perfectly it's designed, is really just a document without people. And ISO 45001 makes it crystal clear that the human element is absolutely 100% critical.
This right here, this is the real foundation of safety. The standard is so clear. It all starts at the very top. Without genuine commitment from leadership, the kind that provides resources, builds a positive culture, and demands open communication, the whole system is basically an empty shell. When leaders make safety a non-negotiable, everyone else follows their lead.
And the standard makes a really, really important distinction here. See, consultation means asking for people's opinions before you make a decision. But participation, well, that goes a huge step further. It's about actively involving workers in the decision-making process itself. It's the difference between just asking for input and actually sharing the power to make change.
So you've got leadership, you've got goals, you've got participation, but how do all these pieces actually work together in the real world? The standard organizes them into this simple, elegant, and continuous loop. It's known as the Plan, Do, Check, Act, or PDCA cycle. And honestly, it's the engine that drives this entire thing. So let's shift into the first gear of that engine, planning. This part is all about looking ahead, way before you take any action. This is where all the essential groundwork gets done. A good plan means looking at absolutely everything, from the super obvious physical hazards like a slippery floor to the much less visible ones like workplace stress. It means assessing all the risks, knowing the law inside and out, and setting clear, measurable goals. This isn't about guesswork, it's about strategy.
Okay, so once that plan is locked in, it's time to put it into motion. This is the do phase, where all that strategy turns into real-world action.
Now, a core concept here is something called the hierarchy of controls. Think of it like a safety playbook, ranked in order of what works best. The absolute best option? Just eliminate the hazard completely. Get rid of it. If you can't do that, you try to substitute it, and so on down the list. The key thing to remember is that personal protective equipment, the hard hat, the gloves, that's the absolute last resort, not the first thing you should be reaching for.
So, the plan is up and running, but how do you know if it's actually working? That brings us right to the third step in our cycle, checking.
This step demands that organizations systematically check their performance. It's not about having a vague feeling that, things seem safer around here. No, it's about hard data. This means tracking progress with performance indicators, doing regular inspections, and running internal audits to find the gaps. Because at the end of the day, you can't manage what you don't measure. And all of that checking, all of that data, it leads directly into our fourth and final stage, improvement. This is where the real learning happens.
So let's be realistic for a second.
what happens when things don't go according to plan? What if there's an accident, an injury, or maybe even just a near miss?
Well, the standard gives us a clear roadmap for exactly this situation. First, you react and control what's happening right now. But you can't stop there. The most critical step is to investigate why it happened, to dig deep and find the root cause, not just blame the obvious symptom. From there, you take action to make sure it never happens again. And you feed those lessons right back into the system to make it even stronger.
And this, right here, this really gets to the core philosophy of ISO 45001. A safe workplace isn't some trophy you win and then put on a shelf. It's a living, breathing process. It's a continuous cycle of planning, doing, checking, and always improving.
Ultimately, this standard provides a really powerful framework for building a true culture of safety. It proves that safety isn't about paperwork, it's about people. And that leaves all of us with one final question to take back to our own jobs. When you look at this cycle of continuous improvement, where is your organization today?